Hey, good evening. Welcome to Frontline Dispatches at Organizing Upgrade. This is a show that's dedicated to spotlighting the most urgent left organizing and activism happening around the country and beyond for racial and economic justice and so much more. And stay tuned for future episodes of Frontline Dispatches every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, that's 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Pacific. My name is Montague Simmons, and I'll be today's host. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, please leave comments and chats. We'll be monitoring these as the show goes on. And if you haven't yet, give Org Upgrade a like and subscribe to the channel on YouTube. And finally, to stay up to speed with all the amazing content coming out of Organizing Upgrade, sign up at our website to hear about upcoming events, videos, and articles about left strategy for organizers. All right, let's get into it. My guest today, a legal professional and transformative justice strategist, Rukia Lumumba. She's the executive director of the People's Advocacy Institute and a co-director of the Electoral Justice Project of the Movement for Black Lives. Rukia actually works at the intersection of criminal and electoral justice, defending the human rights of those that exist behind prison walls, that are engaging communities in community-led governance efforts, and also works around community-led public safety and an intentional grassroots process for cultivating ideas and developing solutions to crime, punishment, punitive legal systems, and social injustices facing far too many communities. Her community is centered on the belief that community agency is what architects robust systems change and what is needed to build new institutional power that paves the way for a more just system rooted in restoration, resilience, and self-determination. Rukia, thank you for joining us today. I can't hear you this time.
Okay, here I go. Thank you.
There you go. No. Thanks for being with us tonight. Not at all.
Always good to be with you, Montague.
Yes.
Excited.
Okay, so let's jump into it. So grassroots organizers around the country for the last few months have been hard at work activating and turning out voters to participate in what's likely been the most contentious election cycle of our lifetime. In 2020, the election comes in a wake of both a pandemic, the largest uprisings in documented history. But before all that, the Movement for Black Lives Electoral Justice Table had already been building and moving a strategy.
That's right.
Would you tell the folks that are with us tonight about EJP?
Yeah, so one, I do want to thank you. Just thank you again for having me. Thanks to the whole Frontline team for this important dialogue to continue. So just really appreciate the fact that we understand that electoral justice is not just during the presidential, but it's all year round, right? Like it's every day. One of my goals is to make engaging in electoral processes like brushing your teeth, right? It's something that we're definitely going to do. Every day we know we're going to engage in it in some way or another. But, EJP was formed really to speak to the need, right, of a deep strategy, a strategy that went beyond the M4BL initial thoughts around engaging the masses of our people, around ending police violence, into a strategy that included all of the ways that we can actually obtain our liberation and create a better system. And so we thought it was important to go deep and engage in a true grassroots organizing to build local power. I'm going to say that again, to build local power in our communities. That means in our neighborhoods, in our cities, in our states, because we are building on a federal level, right, on a national level, but it's important that we engage in that hyper local process. And we understood that our movement needed to ensure that we were developing bold, unapologetic leaders to grow our organization and to win campaigns that mitigated harm and experimented with alternatives, right? We also knew that our liberation really was a result of a collective struggle, and that we must organize a left that challenges white supremacy and builds intentional and accountable multiracial solidarity for electoral justice. And the moment required a strategy. So it required a strategy that would contest the power by engaging in a deep electoral strategy for our people, a process that moved us from being governed to one that allowed us to actually govern, right? Mm-hmm. And so we created the Electoral Justice Project. And to give full credit, Kayla Reed and Jessica Bird, it was their amazing vision that actually birthed the Electoral Justice Project. Mm. And I was brought in shortly thereafter, a few months later, to help see it to fruition. And so we make up a beautiful leadership team that is composed of several different other members, as well as a large table now that just continues to grow. We started with only 5 folks, and now we got over 30 on our table. So we're so excited.
Wow. Well, it feels like since election day has passed, that a lot of folks are literally looking in awe of the work of Black and brown women, Black and brown communities, and poor folks who actually hit the streets not only this summer, but showed up to vote. So can you talk to us specifically about the strategy and what organizers were able, like how they were able to harness the energy of the uprisings, and how you specifically were able to weaponize that at the polls?
Yeah, no, it's a really great question. And before I answer it, I do want to say that, you know, Black and brown women, we've been organizing for decades, for centuries. It's not new, right? And so what you saw happen now is just a continuation of the work that we've been leading, especially around our freedom, right? When we think back to Harriet Tubman, when we think back to Sojourner Truth, when we think about Mississippi's own Ida B. Wells, right? When we think about Fannie Lou Hamer that organized 80,000 Black people to do a mock election, right, in Mississippi to push the United States to allow for voting rights for Black folks. You know, Black and brown women and women in general have been moving and organizing from day one. We've been protecting our families. We've been pushing to ensure that we have what is needed to actually get to a place where we can realize the change that we want to see. And so we're always at the front lines. We're always on the front lines. And so I think this was just an example, and we're finally getting a little credit for it. And so, you know, yeah, I'll say that. In terms of the strategy, I mean, I think, you know, people got to realize the moment that we got the 2016 results, that's when organizing started. So this wasn't a strategy that happens overnight or even within a short period of a year. This was a strategy that began in the minds of our people back in 2016, right? For us, I'm also a member of the Malcolm X grassroots movement, and I'm a member of the People's Advocacy Institute. And so our strategy even went a little bit further back than that. And so the first time that Obama won, and there was a heightened engagement of Black people and poor people and people of color in the electoral process, we realized immediately after Katrina as well, it's actually when we first realized it, that we no longer could just sit on the sidelines and talk theory about what liberation could look like, but we actually had to engage in the process of controlling the resources that allowed our people to live a better quality of life. And engaging in the electoral process oftentimes can provide some power over that, not the totality of power, but some power over that. And so through the Malcolm X grassroots movement, we began to engage in electoral politics back in 2008, when my father, the late Rukia Lumumba, first ran for city council and then ran for mayor in 2013 and won both times successfully. And then as it relates to our mass movement with the Movement for Black Lives, we recognized that it was critical in 2016 that we began to organize. And so the Electoral Justice Project actually came to fruition in 2017 with the distinct purpose of actually winning in these 2020 elections. And when we say winning, it's not just about winning around candidates. We were really talking about winning around the issues that our people have placed as priority. We were talking about harm reduction. What were we going to be able to do to actually decrease the harm to our people? So the Movement for Black Lives, the strategy led by the Electoral Justice Project, Frontlines, you know, Rising Majority, we got a whole crew, right? We really began to create a strategy that engaged Black people everywhere that we were. So that included a fellowship that I have the pleasure of leading, the Electoral Justice League, where for 2 years we've been training young, and not just young, intergenerational organizers, Black organizers across the nation to become campaign managers for the movement. And so we have touched 22 cities. We have fellows in 22 cities across the nation. We also engaged in making sure that our people's priorities were heard and that we connected that to our vision for Black lives. So we engaged in a process of caucuses, right? Or of people's caucuses is what we called them, led by the amazing Kayla Reed. We did caucuses across the United States to help folks decide on what issues the candidates were pushing and who they were leaning closer to based on those issues. And then to really top it off, we held, through the brilliance of Jessica Bird, the Black National Convention, where we brought together over 100,000 folks from across the nation on one night for 3 hours to watch, the amazingness of our movement of Black people, of Indigenous people, and what we have been doing across the nation towards ensuring that our issues and our priorities were heard and moved on. And so people can still go and watch the Black National Convention on YouTube at Black National Convention or on blacknovember.org. It's a really important thing because what it did is it really laid out the Black agenda, which we call the Vision for Black Lives. And so we pushed that out, and that really galvanized the masses of our people to start thinking about this election as more than just voting for a candidate, but to really lift up how we as Black people have been voting consistently based on issues. And I think if we really look at the results of this election, we see that all across the nation, people in general voted based on issues. And I think that's how you can see someone vote for president, vote one way for president, and then vote another way for their congressional seats. And we can go into that. I know I've been talking a lot, so.
No. Thank you. So one thing I want to take out of that is make sure folks understand, trust the Black imagination, given all this work into that strategy, but trust Black women, specifically these women in terms of Rukia, Jessica, and Kayla. That's a massive amount of work. So let me move us forward, and I want to take one step back, as you mentioned in the beginning, that you start talking about Jackson, and there's no way I could bring you on here and not talk about Mississippi. Can you? I know during the election you worked with a team that not only helped work around the election, but also were doing work confronting a variety of fronts of repression. Can you talk to us about what's happening in Mississippi right now?
Yeah. So there's always a lot happening in Mississippi, right? And I'm really grateful to have grown up in this place and to be able to have returned. Mississippians are resilient, they're resourceful, they get things done. And actually, Black Mississippians vote at a higher rate than the national average. And you know this because you're people from Mississippi, so you come from all that greatness, right? And so, here there's an election literally every year. We don't get a year off. People are constantly going to the polls. But the energy this year was beautiful. The energy this year was really amazing. The lines were super long. And so what we did on election day, like we saw many people do in other cities, including, some of our partners with Black Voters Matter and Action St. Louis and a number of other folks, is what we did is that we ensured that we set up at key polling places to make sure that residents had an opportunity to have food and water. Elders had chairs to make sure people had masks, that people felt comfortable, sanitizer, all the things that they needed. Swag, just to make you feel good, and even music to ensure that people had what they needed, and also information, right? So we passed out information around the elections as well at each polling station. And people really, not only did our volunteers and our team feel really good about it, but people standing in those lines really just came up and just really thanked. The majority of our team were younger and or were living with disabilities. So, you know, we had blind folks out there, the folks who could, you know, that were wheelchair bound, and folks were just so thankful that they spent their entire day from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. out there providing for them and taking care of them while they stood in 2 and 3 and 4 hour lines to vote. So that's part of what we did. But, you know, while all of that was going on, we were also dealing with, on a very hyper local level here in Jackson, we were dealing with a city council that had just voted to actually implement what I consider a Mississippi version of broken windows, of stop and frisk. So while we're organizing people to the polls, we're also organizing people to city council to fight this new ordinance or order that the city council had done, which would arrest people here in Jackson on misdemeanors and then detain them in 2 counties about 45 minutes to an hour away from us. And that they were using COVID care funds to actually do this. Right? And so what some of your listening audience may not know is that my brother, Rukia Lumumba, is the mayor, and I was his campaign manager. So what does it look like when, you know, though the mayor doesn't have a vote on city council, he's in the room, he's sitting up there, he's presenting proposals. What does it look like when your campaign manager and your sister is outside protesting City Hall, occupying City Hall, and you're sitting in there? You know, that's some of the challenges that we have to talk about when we really begin to elect delegates to serve as our representatives that really move the will of the people, as opposed to electing politicians, right? Electing career folks who want to do this as a career move, as opposed to as delegates. Now, my brother is definitely that delegate. And so, you know, he understood, right, what we were doing and why we were there. And so we're continuing to occupy City Hall until we see that order change and rescinded, and that $500,000 that they're trying to detain our people on in other counties is actually reallocated to our communities and not to a detention or a jail.
Okay. So one, it's amazing that you're able to hold this at the same time that you're also working national election. But for folks who may be listening in, like in Mississippi, that aren't connected, like how do they actually plug into that work?
Yeah, so we have an amazing organization, the People's Advocacy Institute. And if you're interested in plugging in, you can go to People's Advocacy Institute on Facebook, on any of the social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram. You can also email us at info@peoplesadvocacyinstitute.com. Please check us out. We're always looking for people to help. We also provide the only bail fund in the state. It's called the Mississippi Bail Fund Collective. And so it's housed at our institute. We're also really working to provide COVID care support inside of the prisons and to depopulate our prisons and our jails. And so people can also follow the Mississippi Prison Reform Coalition, which is one of our coalitions led by the Mississippi Poor People's Campaign. Look, here in Mississippi, we have a strong coalition of folks. We just work. We just work. So please, you know, check in with us, y'all. Check in with us. We need you. We need you. We need your brilliance. We need your resources as well.
That's right. That's right. So before I forget, if you're watching this now, Facebook, YouTube, wherever, add your comments. We're going to try and create some time at the end of our conversation so you can ask questions or make comments. But like you talk about the level of work y'all doing in Mississippi, I think everybody also knows the level of work that's actually happening in places like Georgia. Can you talk to us now about one, the importance of the South? Because I think a lot happened in those spaces that folks didn't pay attention to until now that Georgia holds this pivotal space. Yeah, but we need to know like how folks can actually get in and be part of it.
Big shout out to Stacey Abrams, Jessica Bird, and that whole team that really organized. Latasha Brown, Cliff Albright, love them. You know, those are our folks. Black Voters Matter, April Albright, all of the hard work that they've been doing in Georgia, in Alabama, and in Mississippi for forever, for decades. I mean, honestly, Black Voters Matter, the leadership, Latasha Brown and Cliff Albright were the first ones that really helped me realize the power of electoral justice, you know, back in the early 2000s and late 90s. So just really shout them out because they've been doing that hard work for decades unnoticed. And now I'm glad that they're finally in the forefront. But, you know, Georgia is really important. Georgia is important for all the reasons that you just indicated, but it helps symbolize why the South is important. Because many people never thought that Georgia would change. They didn't think that Georgia would actually become more of a bluer state, right? And I think that a lot of times that's what people think about all of us in the South. People forget that the majority of Black people still reside in the South, right? You know, people forget that we still have the largest body of land, unutilized land mass in the South, and so many different resources. In Mississippi, we have the most elected Black officials in the nation, right? And so, you know, there's a lot of opportunity here. And if investment actually begins to come here in a real way, we'll begin to see some serious change. We'll see the change that we saw in Georgia. We'll see it in Alabama. We'll see it in Mississippi. We've been already seeing changes in like Nashville, right? Where Nashville has been able to see some change. We've been seeing it in places like North Carolina on a hyper-local level. Look at Durham. They're doing amazing work in Raleigh and Durham, right? You know, we also are seeing it in other parts of Tennessee, including like in Memphis. We saw rights restoration in Florida and Louisiana. So we're beginning to see change throughout the South, but there has to be a deeper investment in the South. What we're seeing right now are pennies. We get the penny resources that are thrown our way because people tend to say, well, it's super red, it's not going to change. In 2018 in Mississippi, which is a deep red state, in 2018, we saw 9 counties shift from red to blue, right? 9 counties. Now we got like 80 something counties. So, but you know, we shift. But, you know, and even this year, we saw our people in Mississippi vote in the right way. We saw 3 ballot initiatives passed. One that allowed for medical marijuana. We also saw a new flag. So the Confederate emblem, we were the last state bearing the Confederate emblem on our flag. We've been fighting that for over a decade, and we finally have a new flag now. People voted on that this election cycle. And then this election cycle, we also voted to finally do away with a Jim Crow electoral college law that actually impacts our Black counties, our predominantly Black counties, in a way where it used to, we just voted that law out. But what would happen is that you would have to have a 2-part election process. You would have, the people would vote, but then you'll have an electoral college that actually decides the election. So oftentimes you saw predominantly Black counties have white elected officials in position.
Wow.
And now it's gone. So we're moving.
Yeah. So how do people plug in? Like not only like we talked about specifically Black November, we talked about People's Advocacy Institute, but if people aren't in Mississippi, how do they plug into the work? Because I know there's other folks living in different cities that are ready, but they don't know how to get in.
Yeah. So one way that folks can definitely plug in is through giving resources. And I know that people get tired of people asking them for money. I get it. I totally get it. But I am going to say that's one way if you don't have time to actually do more. The Southern Power Fund is a coalition of Southern organizations that are coming together to fundraise and provide resources across the South to existing infrastructure and to build new infrastructure in hyperlocal spaces. And so the Southern Power Fund, and people can go to that website, Southern Power Fund. The other way is that, follow the movement for Black Lives because we're always talking about it. Follow songs, Southerners on New Ground. You can sign up for these listservs to join to get information on a consistent basis. So that's Southerners on New Ground. That's M4BL, Movement for Black Lives. Of course, we said that. Southern Power Fund. And then also, if you have a loved one that's living in the South, tap into them. Begin to introduce them to the various organizations that I'm talking about, including ours at the People's Advocacy Institute. We love engaging our folks. And so that's another way. Begin to talk to your family, see how they're doing, see what's going on with them, and then push them and move them towards that.
Wow. So tell me this, like we've gone through like one, you're holding a massive amount of work in multiple spaces. Um, so given all the lenses and all the conversations that you're having, like what should we be looking for? I mean, I know everybody's waiting right now to confirm the president-elect, but it feels like going into next year, especially as we navigate a COVID reality and folks are really trying to push austerity on people in real and tangible ways, let alone the ongoing intensified state of racial hostility in the country. Like, where should we be putting our energy? What should we be looking for?
Yeah. I mean, we should absolutely be looking at the Breathe Act. We should be looking for the Breathe Act. Go to breatheact.org. Learn about it. Read it. It's real short. It's simple. It's a comprehensive plan to actually reallocate funds, reinvest in our communities, and divest from harmful approaches to violence that we've seen be very harmful to our people. We also, and with the Breathe Act, it's important to look at it as a national, agenda or national legislation, but also look at it in how you can make it local, how you can make it a local policy in your city or your state. So that's one thing. We also want folks to be remembering that the environment and climate change is real, that environmental justice and climate change is real. And a lot of what we're experiencing with COVID and a number of other things that happened before COVID, hurricanes that have been plaguing our cities this year at later dates. We don't normally have hurricanes in November in Mississippi and in the Gulf Coast. And so, but we're experiencing that now. And so we really want folks to also plug into the Green New Deal led by the amazing Colette Pichon Battle. So definitely that at the Center, the Gulf Coast Center for Law and Policy. And then we also, I really encourage people to also look at what does it mean to create community-led responses to violence. That's right. Look at the models that exist out there that are working. Look at the cure violence models. Look at in your city, does it exist? Where are some other things that might be helpful? What are some of the somatic trainings like the BOLD trainings that you can obtain to actually help us begin to take care of each other and not rely on a system to take care of us? So I think those are the things.
Thank you. Thank you. So to our audience, if you enjoyed this conversation, this video, stay up to speed with all the amazing content coming out of Organizing Upgrade. Go to our website, sign up to hear about upcoming events, videos, articles about left strategy for organizers. Rukia, thank you. Thank you for making time, like in the midst of everything, to join us this evening. Do you have any last thoughts that you wanted to share as we wrap up?
The last thing I would say is that definitely if people are interested in really engaging in a community-led process around governing, check out the JacksonPeoplesAssembly.org and also check out the People's Movement Assembly led by the Southern Movement Assemblies. Those are really important spaces that begin to shift our perspective around what does it look like to actually govern as a people and not to just be governed. So I appreciate you, Montague.
No, thank you. Thank you, Rukia. And thank you to all who joined us today. Thank you to our guest again, Rukia. And thank you to the production team at Organizing Upgrade. And please join us again next week, same day on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, and 4 p.m. Pacific. Thank you. Good night.
Free the land.
Free the land.